Welcome to the studio in beautiful Meredith, New Hampshire. Today I thought we'd do some sewing tips, and I thought we'd go over some of the things I have here in the studio that were well thought out. And one of them is our beautiful design wall. Bear with me while I hold the camera. I normally don't do this, but some of the things I'm going to show you today were things I'm going to hold, and it were kind of small stuff, and it's a pain in the butt to do it with a tripod. So here is my design wall, and it is 2 pieces of 1-inch thick insulation. I covered it with a white flannel that was quilt backing, so it was extra wide. They're individually covered, and I used duct tape, wrapped the flannel around the back. Around the side I used L brackets, screwed into the wall, then set these against it and then screwed into this. Then I found that I needed a straight line, so I put the numbered tape up there. And that was really fun. So you might hear Edward talking a lot in the video. I'm sorry, he doesn't shut up. That's just, it is what it is. Before we continue, I want to let you know that I sewed in my dining room forever, my living room, my bedroom, my kitchen, wherever I was. I moved a lot. I didn't always have a studio, and you may not have 8 feet of space or whatever for a design wall. I get it. I was there forever. Another idea is, yes, Edward, yes. These fleece throws. I bought this at Walmart for $2.50. It's 50 by 60 inches. It was $2.50. You can lay this out on a bed or on your living room floor, kitchen floor, outside in the yard, on the hood of your car. Lay your pieces on it, bring it in the house, use it as, roll it back up with the stuff on it. You can make a way. You can figure a way to do it. It doesn't have to be stuck on your wall. It doesn't have to be a permanent fixture in your house. You can use one of these panels or whatever, slide it under a bed. You can use a 4x4 piece and lay out parts of a quilt at a time. It doesn't have to be this, big permanent thing in your house. Do with what you got. Now here I am working on a quilt, and so that's my design surface, and my sewing machine is way over here. So do you think I want to stand there and pin all these squares together? No. Do you think if I flip them and then walk all the way over here to pin them, I'm going to have it right when I sew them together? No. So what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? So what I did was I cut little pieces of fabric, a light colored fabric, and I used a Sharpie, and I wrote numbers on each one. So then what I do is I come to each block. I do this. All right, so here we go. We've got our pieces. Here's number 1. Here's number 2. So, flip. All right. Hope you can see this well. All right, so gonna want to pin that seam. Pin the end. And we have a hidden seam under here. Now, I have 2 different colored pin heads here. I have red and green. Since the seam is lying where it'll lay nice and flat in the direction that I'm sewing, and I won't need to double check it, I'm going to pin that with one of my green pins. Here's piece number 3, piece number 4. That's lying in the correct direction also. So I always pin where there's a seam. I'm using a green pin because I'm not going to have to peek under the hood for that. Here's number 5. 6 is going below it. Well, these are laying the right way, but that's perfect. And if the seam's on top and I can obviously see it, I don't really care what color pin I'm going to use, but I've never heard of anybody else color coding the pins depending on what's happening underneath, but it's just a way that makes my life easier, because I always stop and check to see what's happening there. But if I don't need to, it's nice to just stop and pull the pins out. Also, I like to pin and leave plenty of space. So if I don't feel like stopping and pulling the pin out, I don't actually have to. Because I find I often have a little bobble if I stop and pull it out. But if I hit the pin, I often destroy it. So, alright, so those 4 are ready to go. So my actual sewing machine is a New Home machine. I think the thing is, I don't know, 20 years old? I service it myself. I can probably take it apart and put it back together, although it's never necessary because it's just an awesome machine. I clean it out and, oil it where it needs to be oiled regularly, and it's been a great machine for years and years and years. So, no major work has ever been necessary on this thing. It's a terrific bomb-proof machine. Let's see if we can get a really good, there we go, a pretty good view here of the needle. Let's move it over here a little bit. Now you can really see what I'm doing in here. So when I begin sewing, I like to put it under the needle maybe 3/8 of an inch or so. Put the presser foot down. I put the needle down till it's coming back up. Then I sew backwards till the edge. Then I sew forward. Ta-da! That's it. It never gives me any trouble. See, I have a green pin, so I knew I didn't have to peek under here. And I didn't have to stop and pull my needles out, my pins out, because I put them in a place where I wasn't going to have to sew over them. And now, since I've already started, I don't want to waste any thread, so here I go. I just chain sew all these suckers. Those I actually had into the seam. Sewed right over them. Feeling very badass today. Now I have these suckers all squared up. I'm really particular about that. A lot of people hate squaring everything up. It takes time. It's a real pain. However, I find it always is surprising when I square up how much stuff I actually am cutting off. I oversize stuff now just so I can square it up nice and square. Then I'm not fudging anything and pulling and tightening, and my corners always meet really nice and everything lies so nice and flat. I am a long armer, and it really makes that process so much easier when everything lies nice and flat, and I'm really happy not to have to fudge it anywhere. So once we cut threads, I simply pinned together the 2 units that were sewn together, and we did have one backwards seam here marked with a red pin, and we're going to go back to the sewing machine. Approaching that. Now, I have the needle still in the fabric. And I'm going to lift the presser foot, peek underneath, make sure that is going in the direction I like. I'm going to pull that pin out because everything is hunky-dory. So we've left all the numbers on all this time. So it's really easy to make sure that everything is still in the right order. And since there's only 8 blocks in this row, we have our last line up here, and everything lines up very nice. The seams are going in the right direction, so we have one more seam to sew. These pins are really hard to pick up. I'm using a red pin just because it was the easiest one to grab. Oh, hey, I just thought of another tip. I bought some stuff that's like silly putty and put it on the bottom of my machine pedal, and it keeps the pedal from creeping around on my hardwood floor. That's tip number, I don't know, 4, something like that. You're welcome. All right, so now we can take off our numbers. I keep them in order, except for number 1. We're going to leave the pin for number 1, just so we remember which was the top. We're just going to leave the pin in there when we go to the ironing board, because we'll forget what was the top. You know we will. So let's go over to the ironing board. All right, so we're at the ironing station, and the last row that was ironed, the new seams had been ironed down, so we're going to iron these up. So I always iron them flat and then up. Flat, up. My iron is a Rowenta. It's new. I had a Shark. I did not have it very long, and I was ironing one day and the red light just went out and it just died. I loved that iron. However, if you didn't use it for, I think, 8 minutes, it shut off by itself. And to turn it on, it wasn't just like tip it down and you turn it on. You had to tip it down, tip it up, and then press this little button like 5 times. It's frustrating. So its death, its early death, I guess, was kind of a blessing, because I love my Rowenta. Love my Rowenta. Steams like a boss. Alright, so those seams are steamed, and then additionally I lay it down again, and I iron it nice and straight. This is just a flannel covered couple of pieces of heat protected thing. So I usually iron that nice and flat and I let it cool. Then I iron the rest of it and let that cool. Meanwhile, we'll take our numbers and some pins and come over and do our last row. Once the last row is sewn, what we would do is use the numbers to number the tops of the rows so that the rows will go together in the order that I have them up there. Voila! I'll show you the quilt more time. So I'm back, and as promised, I have pulled all of the strips down off of the design wall, and at the top of each one I have marked a row number. And I pinned row number 1 and 2 together, beginning with where there's a seam that each one has that butts up. Row number 1, I had all of the block seams facing upwards. Row number 2, all the block seams were facing downwards so that they butt nicely together here. So I pinned that seam first. Then I went and pinned that seam that's underneath that could be flip-flopping. And I, again, used a corresponding pin color, green for, I don't need to peek, and red for I better check it. Of course, you may not have red or green pins. You'll color code it your way, I'm certain. And then I pinned, you know, the seam that's on top or the seam. I pin a lot, and it takes a little bit of time, but I have never come back and said, wow, I just pinned that way too much. But there have been times where I thought, you know, I should have pinned that more. More is always better. So, I'm going to go to the sewing machine. I'm going to start sewing this stuff together. If I had more pins that I liked, I would probably pin all 10 of the rows, you know, 2 by 2. But, you know, I have a lot of pins. I have all these big ones. Hey, oh, hey, here's another tip. This is one of those magnet cups that you get at the, I think I got this at Job Lot or Harbor Freight. They sell these to mechanics to keep screws and bolts and stuff in. I use them for pins, of course. If you have little kids and you have pins around your house, it's really good to have something like this. Additionally, I have something else to show you. I got this for Christmas. I get pins on the floor all the time. Somebody got me this with a handle, so you just roll, you know, and it picks up pins or anything else. I think I've seen these at Home Depot for like $25, but I think that was at Job Lot or something much less expensive. I believe it's used. Roofers will roll around your yard after they do your roof to make sure they pick up nails and stuff. But I'm sure there's a lot of other applications way more important than picking up nails or, I mean, pins off your floor. But it's pretty cool. I love magnets. I think it's magic. So it's another good thing. Hey, that's tip like number 6 or something. Lots of tips coming your way because I've been sewing a really long time. I know a lot of cool stuff. So, all right, I'm going to sew this stuff together. I think later we're going to do some tips on binding because I love binding. Maybe we'll do some labels. Labels are awesome. You better be labeling your stuff. Don't tell me your quilts aren't good enough because they are. So, I'm going to do this. Be back with you. We have these rows sewn together, block by block by block. And where each block met, the block butts, if you will, have been ironed in, you know, one direction for one set of blocks and in the opposing direction for the next set, so that the block butts are in opposing directions, making it easier to meet them. So now here, when we're sewing these together, these will butt nicely. Each butt should be in opposing direction. This is part of good planning. Let's see if you can see that there. This is part of good planning when you're ironing and It's not always easy to plan this out from the very beginning, but it's really important to think out as you're putting rows together at least, but it certainly makes it easier when you're putting the quilt together. And in this row, since I'm going to be sewing down this way, the bottom here will be going in the wrong direction. I will pin these joints first. That is, how I always go about it. So I would start pinning where the blocks butt first. And using a red pin for these because they are all always going in the same direction. Block butts first, red pins, and then I always pin the end also. And you can see, they're laying nice and flat because, again, I square everything up really nice. Block butts first. Oops. And it goes pretty fast when you do, one thing at a time, First the block butts. And since there are 8 blocks, that goes, pretty quick. On larger quilts, of course, that can take longer. Then I would go and find the places where it's, these ones that are underneath. Each block had one. And some of them were going the right way and some were going the wrong way. So, I feel, oh, there's that one. That one's going the right way. Green pin. That one's going the right way. Yay. Green pin. Wrong way. Wah. Red pin. Right way, green pin. And I like to put these back about, half an inch because, since it's going the right way and I don't have to stop, I'll put the green pin back about a half an inch and then I can just zoom right over it. Don't even have to stop. I'm gonna drive by that one. This one, red pin. All right, so then I have all of these. These are all, nope, some of them are going the right way. It doesn't matter. I'll pin all of these with whatever colors I have left because they're on top. I can see them. I can stop or not, but I can, those are easy to sew right over because they're right there. It's pretty quick work. I'll go through it. We're almost on this quilt. I'll show you the end of it. I'll show you well, you can see the back. The back is nice and neat. I've been being really careful as I iron it. I clip my threads as I go, so this will be, once I'm done sewing, all nice and neat. I'll give it one more good iron over. And I've got some more tips to show you about hanging my quilts, how I display my quilts, and I have some antiques that I hang and like to display, and let's take a look at that. I've had this beauty for years. It's always hung on my wall, and as you can see, there's not a big quilt hanger at the top. It's very old. I didn't want to have a tube on the back of it. I didn't want to hang it on a roller or a rod or attach something on it. So what I've done is put a flat metal bar on the wall that I just covered with black electrical tape, and you can see it sticking out the sides. I didn't care about that. And I drilled holes in that and put screws on it. It's just a flat metal bar from the hardware store. It's made of steel. I think it cost, I don't know, $11. And I have flat neo medium, I think that's how you pronounce it, magnets. Those aren't cheap, but they're not super expensive. And I have 5 of them holding the quilt against that magnetic metal bar. Doesn't do any damage to the quilt, but it holds it securely. If the thing was really wavy, I could have put another bar down at the bottom, but that wasn't necessary. And it hangs it really nicely, it doesn't damage it at all. And I could have used more magnets if it was really heavy, but 5 of them holds it pretty well. And this sucker, this isn't a super thin one. This has batting and a padded back. But it, you know, it's an old quilt. It's really delicate, and you know, I've done some repairs to it, but it's held without, you know, any damage, and it works pretty well. I think that's a great tip. How about you? So hopefully you're enjoying my foray into other beneficial tips involving quilt hanging. And here are some quilts that I have hanging on rods in my studio. If you need to hang a lot of quilts, and I mean a lot of quilts, I have, as you can see, several here, and I had to hang some rods for this. These rods are actually EMT conduit. It is an electrical supply conduit at Home Depot. I believe these are 1 1/4 inch rods. They are very inexpensive when compared to closet rod, and they're probably 3 times as strong. You can get these, you know, 2 inch in circumference if you want, but the 1 1/4 or 1 inch, these might be 1 inch, are very, very strong. You can see here, this is a span of, I think, 8 feet, 8.5 feet, and they don't dip at all. You know, I can bounce them a little bit, but they do not dip. I had them in previous places hung for years, and they don't sag over time. It's very inexpensive. I was just looking on Home Depot's site. The 2 inch conduit is $25 for 10 feet. This stuff is very, very strong. So if you do buy some of this and you need to cut it, don't buy the cutting tools made for like copper plumbing pipe. This stuff is much harder. Buy the cutting tools made specifically for EMT conduit, or you can try a hacksaw, but it takes a long time. They will cut this, maybe only 1 or 2 pieces at Home Depot for you. They will grumble about it, but they will cut it for you. I used hangers meant for closet rod. You know, they have a closed end, and then they have an open end. And they hang, you know, with 3 screws. I did get the metal ones this time. I've hung them with the plastic ones before. But I think they look nice. You can paint these rods. I do clean them because, you know, sometimes they have some gunk on them, and I take the labels off. But those quilts are pretty heavy. You know, an 8-foot span. You can hang a lot of quilts. They're pretty heavy. They look nice. So the way I hang them is, and you know, I've done a lot of figuring on this. I like to see 18 inches of quilt. So if I hang more than 1 rod, I hang the second rod 18 inches lower than the first rod, and I hang it 2 inches out. So 2 inches out, 18 inches down. Then the third one would be 2 inches out from that and 18 inches down. I lived in another place where we had vaulted ceilings, and I was able to hang, I think, 6 rods. So I had to, you know, start at the top 2 inches out from the wall, and at the bottom, you know, I was out, you know, like 14 inches, 16 inches, whatever. And it looked really, really, really nice. So I hope this tip helps you get your quilts out of the closet, out of the bins, out of the boxes, and hang them up in a way that allows you to enjoy them in a pleasant way. So here's the quilt. The piecing is done. There's still lots of work to do, but that's all for another video. I hope these tips and tricks have helped you make your piecing more exact, quicker, easier. I hope some of the other tips helped you as well. If you liked this video, if it helped you out, hope you'll give me a like. I'd love a like. If you want to subscribe, that would be terrific. If you hit the bell, YouTube will notify you when I make other videos. I think I'll make a couple more this week, actually. We're going to do one on binding. We're going to do one on labels. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Ed, are you having a tough day in the sewing room? Are you having a tough day in the sewing room? Really?